Welcome to today's program. Today we have a most distinguished guest, a most eminent personality, the most Venerable Vimuththa Therani, who will be our guest. Welcome to the program, Vimuththa Therani ji.
Thank you very much, Therwan Saranai. It's nice to be here.
Today we will explore why you have chosen the path of a Buddhist nun, and we will explore the background that has led for you to adopt this path, and then develop further some ideas about Buddhist practices, and also develop an understanding of meditation. So tell me, what brought you to adopt this path of a Buddhist nun?
Firstly, I would like to say that my path was very different, and after finishing my studies, I started working in 2 companies, and then out of these 2 companies, I handled a very high rank designation, as you call it in the world, position of a sales manager and a marketing manager and a trainer as well. I was in training and development. And when I was in one of these companies working, there was so much of demanding decisions, and the stress levels were increasing. We were of course trained to handle the increasing stress levels as well, but I was always wondering, what is the purpose of life, and what are we here for? And yes, of course, I was receiving a very good income, and I was able to travel a lot, and I explored many things, different paths in life. But that always brought me to this same question: what am I doing with my life? And how is it that at one time I'm extremely happy and one time I'm extremely sad? And I was wanting more and thinking that if I have so much more, maybe I would be happy at that time. And the more I reached out in this process, I discovered one day that I'm actually quite uncomfortable and sad inside. But outside, in the outside world, to the outside world, they would see me as an extremely successful person. But within myself, I was having different complications and different questions which had no reasoning or rhythm or rhyme in life. Mm-hmm. So I really wanted to discover, is there a way that we could balance out life? Is there a way which we could take some time to ease off a little bit? And yes, I did take the time to ease off. And at that time I was very well, I was very at peace, and calmness followed and everything. But the moment again that I was back in so many things as we call life, everything else came. So this tremendous feeling which I had going from one end to the other, and from running from one end to the other, I was becoming tired of this, and I really wanted answers. And then I followed certain practices in according to different cultures, according to different methods, and then finally came to a place of my life where I discovered a path where it seems to answer a lot of those questions which was running through my head. And when I actually practice this, it still makes sense. Even after 2,500 years after this method was being taught in the world, it still made sense when you actually do it now in a day-to-day life. So that made me choose the robes as well.
So basically, the stressful environment
Hmm.
and asking the question about the meaning of life,
Hmm.
what are we here for, seems to have been very deep questions that you asked, which must have been a turning point in your life to seek some solutions to some of those questions, deep questions you raised. And then you chosen the path of the Buddha, so that was the reasoning behind choosing this path. So
Yes.
when did you ordain?
Actually, I started this search about nearly about 17 years back. This questioning, the rhythm of questioning of why am I here, what am I doing, and what is it that drives us to do things in life, and how are we happy at one time and sad at one time and everything in between. That was about 17 years back, and I started to meditate in different levels and whatever. But after doing most of that, I truly discovered that there is a thing called knowledge, and then there is a thing called wisdom, which was two different things. I made the mistake of thinking that knowledge means wisdom, but then later on I discovered that knowledge means something else and wisdom means something completely different. And then from there onwards, it's about 3 years since I've ordained as a Buddhist nun, but my search was for about 17 years, I would say.
So did you turn to meditation prior to becoming ordained?
Yes, I did. I actually started the meditations during this line of questioning from myself. And then I wanted to find a path or some answers to some real answers, not temporary solutions. And that led me into meditations of various kinds, various methods, which helped me immensely in solving different things.
Of course, now you have a monastery, I believe, in Sri Lanka, which is basically spreading this message of meditation and practice. And it seems to me, from examining your life, you are very much deeply involved with the spread of meditation. And meditation is something that the Western world is now adopting as a way of self-development and self-improvement. And so have you found an echo with meditation practice that you undertake and how it is applied in the West?
Developing myself was a very humble process. And throughout this process, I actually fell down a lot. And I had to get up on my own and discover things. And what made me think about taking another step into the world was to see, I saw myself in a lot of other people struggling in the same way, asking themselves what are they really doing and where life is headed. Some of them, it was about the stress, but for some of them, they didn't even know what was causing the stress and that they are stressed. So what I saw in all of this was that if I have been struggling so much, maybe there's a person outside who needs this message, who needs to hear this message, and who would benefit out of this message. So I thought about taking this into the world of the places that I have been invited for this sole purpose only, and not any monetary gains. And regarding the types of meditations and things that the Western world is looking for, it's almost like, we re-evaluate our life, our way of thinking, or technology, ways of developing ourselves. And everybody wants the revolution to begin. Everybody wants a new thing, a new version. Even if we just take a phone, we want another new version, another new version, and another new version. And I feel that when we get caught up in this mess of evolution and revolution, we sometimes forget where all of this are coming from, which is the mind.
Mhm.
And then people, when they get stressed and or when they have fear or all sorts of things like that, they look for another method to open up, to re-evaluate and actually gain some more, substitute this in a different way. So in that sense, a lot of people are looking at meditations to calm themselves, to help themselves. But this is only the basic level of meditation. But meditation can grow into a much, much deeper way.
You touched on knowledge and wisdom and the difference between the two. And it seems to me that the rest of the world is driven more by knowledge or acquisition of knowledge than wisdom. So can you elaborate the difference between knowledge and wisdom?
The world is actually driven by, I would say, power. Power and also wanting more and more. And when this wanting more and more concept comes into us, even with knowledge, we think that acquiring knowledge gives us everything, gives us this power, gives us this wisdom, gives us everything. But knowledge is only knowledge. I would elaborate on this. I'll give an example. You see, a child goes through maybe nursery to kindergarten to year 5 to grade 10 or O-levels and whatever. And the person acquires knowledge on how to do things. But that person will only be successful when he goes out to the world and when he starts working and when he starts doing. Because that's where the application comes of the knowledge gained. And through the knowledge gained, you gain another level of wisdom. Because when you interact with people, when you deal with people, you get to know what was being taught and how to apply what was being taught. For that part, you need the wisdom. And what we have today is we have so much of knowledge everywhere. You just Google everything, even meditation, the methods, the ways of meditation can be just Googled. But where is the wisdom? The wisdom is in the practice of meditation.
So it seems to me the wisdom is something that decides between what is right and what is wrong. And knowledge is just acquisition of knowledge, knowing things, but not how to apply that knowledge. Will that be a correct way of describing it?
Yes, exactly.
So in terms of meditation, can you briefly say what is meditation and how does meditation help the individual?
Meditation means the awareness of the mind, being aware of the mind. Because if I give an example, how do we actually do things? How do we really see things? How do we hear things? How do we touch things? How do we smell, taste things? We think that it's through the eyes. Yes, part of it, the first part of it is through the eyes. But actually, it gets stored somewhere which is called the mind. And through the mind, you're able to address what you're seeing, that you are seeing things, that you're aware of things. This awareness part of seeing things is done through the mind. The awareness part of hearing things is not only the ear, it's through your mind that you know and that you feel and that you taste and that you could touch and feel. It's because of the mind, the awareness of the mind. So everything that we do, you see, we get so complicated in day-to-day life. We think we have to do hundreds of things, maybe thousands of things. But actually this can be brought down just to 6 things, which is the awareness of the 6 senses. through the eyes and the sight and the awareness of the sight, the awareness of sound, the awareness of smell, the awareness of taste and touch. This is all in the mind. So what we really do in meditation is we try to build a method to see the mind, how the mind works, how the mind takes decisions, on what levels they take the decisions.
These 5 or 6 senses that all humans possess, subject to the hearing working and the eyesight working, the sense of touch and smell and all these things. So it seems to me that this is very universal. It applies to all human beings.
Yes.
That somehow these senses are the inputs into the mind, and the mind itself also has these thought processes which are its input. So meditation allows you to do what? Is it the case that the human mind or the senses cling to these feelings and sensations, that we don't actually, we sort of attach ourselves to these things and then we don't let go, and these become the stress points? Is that how it's working?
Yes, it is. It is through the awareness. When we develop the meditations, the ways of knowing the mind or observing the mind or being aware of the mind, you start seeing how you make decisions, on what basis you make decisions, and how these 6 senses, you're making use of the 6 senses to actually gain the information, and then you're making the decisions based on the information that you're gaining. So the main part is the mind, and how the mind is creating in one way and feeding in the other way. So it's a back and forth process.
So it's like a mirror.
Yes, it's a mirror. And what we're trying to do
Reflects.
here, yes, we are trying to see the reflections. We're trying to see the reflections, how the mind takes decisions. Because if we are able to be aware how the mind takes the decisions, maybe we can change the decisions.
Okay, that's very profound. So when we look back into history, meditation can be found in all around the world. And when we see an image of the Buddha, he's in a sitting posture in a contemplative state, he's meditating. So did the Buddha actually discover, what kind of meditation did the Buddha discover? And we hear that Buddha attained enlightenment. So can you tell us, what is it that the Buddha discovered? Was it a particular type of meditation? And what is the meaning of enlightenment? I think that would be quite interesting to know from yourself.
A prince called Siddhartha, who had basically everything in life, monetary. He had the palaces, he had a beautiful wife, he had his kingdom, and he was just going to be crowned as the king of that kingdom. Basically, he had everything, but his mind was focusing on something completely different. He was wondering, why am I happy at one point and why am I sad at one point? After having all of these things, all the luxuries that the world could offer me, I have this, but I still feel lonely, and I still feel sad, and I still feel agitated, and I still feel angry, and I still have fear within myself. And is there a way to get rid of this? Not on a temporary basis, because I can do that on a temporary basis, he thought. But is it possible? Is there a way, or is there a method to get rid of this suffering completely, not temporarily, but permanently? Is there a way? And that's why he left everything that he ever owned and thought, I can't discover this being here. Maybe there's a teacher, maybe there's a way, maybe there's a method that I should follow in order for me to eradicate suffering. You see, his journey is all about completely taking off suffering, not on a temporary basis, but complete eradication of suffering. So he went to many teachers, many ways, many methods. He learned all of this. But then again he discovered that yes, it's a temporary solution, but it's not a permanent solution. And then one day he started to think about life again, and then he started meditating in a completely different way. All the other methods helped him to a certain extent, but then he developed something completely different. He discovered something completely different. What he discovered was the method of Vipassana meditation. We call this the Vipassana meditation. And
so Vipassana meditation is like insight into your being.
Yes,
as a person.
Insight, actually it could be taken as insight into what life is, insight into what the world is, insight, actually he came from the world. He looked at the world and thought, actually what we are seeing as the world is one world. But what we are seeing with our senses, hearing, that is another world. Deep within is another world. So he discovered there are two worlds. And how does these two worlds form is actually from one world. Is everything to do with the six senses. And then he discovered, no, there's another world. All this is created from the mind. And mind itself is a world. So this was the Vipassana that he discovered. This is the insight that he discovered. And then he went into seeing the sides of the mind, the new phases of the mind. As the mind changes, each phase showing one angle and then going into a completely different angle, and then showing that angle and then going into another completely different angle. He discovered how the mind works with all these new phases from time to time. When it's agitation, it's a new phase. When it's craving, it's another phase. So he discovered this, what we say as insight is the discoveration of the phases of the mind, being aware of the mind.
So is it fair to say that enlightenment is something that has awakened the Buddha to the realities of life and the realities of the mind? And the mind itself is involved in so many passions because of the senses. And it's able to rise above that, it's able to burn away those passions. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, it is. It is. And also, I would elaborate a little bit more on that. He also discovered that we think that it is because of the six senses that the mind is being controlled. But he discovered that it's because of the mind that the six senses are being controlled. See, he discovered a completely different angle of this. And then he went deeply into how we make decisions, on what basis we make decisions. And through that, he discovered a universal language in between all of these things, where it applies not to one person, or it doesn't apply just to only the mankind, but it applies to all living beings on all different realms, all different worlds, the animal kingdom, you name it. It's the same theory which works. It's the same theory. And this was the universal language actually that he discovered.
It seems like there's a point when there is unsatisfactoriness. And Buddhism describes it as a dukkha, status of unsatisfactoriness. Then he goes through this understanding of unsatisfactoriness and comes out being enlightened by understanding the operation of the world. And so it's many times you see that the human condition is described in three different ways. You have this element of greed that all humans possess. And there's also this element of hatred, ill will. And there is also this amazing aspect, something called the delusion. We think we know something, but we actually don't. So can you elaborate on these ideas of greed, hatred and delusion, which are very deep concepts, maybe not being able to cover this in this particular program. But is that the case, that these basic elements are universal and therefore that makes the Buddha's discovery universal?
Yes, of course. The basic fact is that we get attached to things. But why do a person get attached to things? It is because it seems to be very desirable at one point of time, but then it starts to change. And when a situation starts to change, we actually start discovering even more ways how to hold on to what is changing. And that builds even more desire. And then we are experiencing the pleasures of the world, or our senses, or whatever you want to name it and call it. But it's still the desire which keeps us going in this way. And when we cling from one thing to the other, it actually, we are telling ourselves, as long as I have this, I will be happy. And as long as I don't have this, I'm not going to be happy. So of course, I want to be happy. And this happiness, we are always searching for happiness. But by searching for happiness in the wrong directions, in the wrong places, we are actually getting attached to more and more of the desiring part of happiness. And this desire, which is created in the mind, develops into something called grasping. We are not sufficient enough to think that I have this and this is all I want nothing else. Because this desire builds after a time period, it starts deteriorating. And when it starts to deteriorate, we want more and we long for more. So we cling from one thing to another thing. And when that desire fades away, we cling from that thing to the other thing. This is how desire is created in the mind. And we get attached to this desire. Actually, we don't get attached to the thing. We get attached to desire more and more. And what causes hate is when we don't have what we so want in life. That builds hate. So the other side, I would say, if desire is in one side, the complete other side of this face is hate and ill will and fear and agitation and everything which is combined. Because I don't have my way, I can't get my way, I can't get my point across, and I can't have everything that I want the way I desire. That builds hate. And the in between these two faces, desire and hate, or ill will we could call it, is because of the delusion that we are thinking that I will have my way. I can have everything that I so want in life. And I can actually hold on to this as well. But the fact in life is that it arises, it lasts for some time, and then it starts to deteriorate, and then it fades away. Just like life itself. You begin with birth, it lasts for a time, then it starts to decay, and then it starts to fade away. So this is the same theory which goes through the patterns of desire, hate, and the delusion of life. That we are thinking that I will have everything that I want, maybe one day, maybe not at this time, but maybe another time. Then this delusion builds more into desire. And when it doesn't happen our way, we have hate, and we have worry, we have suffering, and we have pain, and everything that we don't want to deal with. It's for a temporary happiness for a very, very temporary happiness, we are actually sacrificing so much. We are willing to go through so much pain and suffering and everything for that very small bit of happiness. And when it starts to fade away, again, we are in the same frame, we are in the same square one. So this pattern of life is universal. It applies to everybody. It applies to all living beings. And the way out of it, Lord Buddha discovered the way out of this framework.
A person in the street, a prime minister of a country, or a president of a country, these notions of greed, I want this and that, and this notion of I hate this, this notion of delusion, where I think I have got it, I'm happy, but you're not.
Yes.
So these aspects play on every personality on this planet, whether you are a president or a person in the street, whether you are executive of a corporation. So the world seems to me to be driven by these things, and as a consequence, not having the wisdom to control these passions, the world becomes a very bad place. And so it seems to me that the meditation aspects allows you to reflect on these values. Is that the correct way to understand meditation?
Yes, the more the world is being driven by desire, driven by hate, and driven actually by delusion, the more we get ourselves complicated, the more the world seems to be very desirable, but in actual fact, it actually creates a lot of suffering inside. And this suffering is so laminated, it's actually laminated, you can't really see this. At a glance you wouldn't notice, but you need to go deep within, and to go deep within is where we need the meditations. And also to answer the question of realizations or enlightenment. You see, enlightenment is something that you can't describe. It is something that is often experienced. It's a wisdom. It's a wisdom which you gain. And through this wisdom, what you actually have been doing is you have been completely eradicating desire, complete eradication of hate, and the complete eradication of delusion. Because once you eradicate delusion, the other two falls just like dominoes. And to be able to say a little bit about the fact of enlightenment, it's almost like, think if you don't feel unhappy or sad, you're just content with everything. Think if you're in a state of mind where nothing can affect you, no anger can affect you, no hatred can affect you, nothing will affect you and give you sadness and give you pain, because you're in contentment with everything which is around you and which is within you. It's a state like that.
That leads me to another question. Critics of meditation say that meditation is very self-indulgent, and it's about the person, it's about self. Now, do you agree with that assessment, or do you think meditation has value for the rest of the world? It's not self-indulgent, it's not selfish. And how does it relate to the rest of the world? Or can you explain a little bit about that?
Actually, yeah, it's a very, very good question. Yes and no answers for that. Well, yes, because it is looking at oneself. It is looking at an internal side of a person. But in another way, let me explain this with an example. See, if a person is sick, what does he have to do? Is there any point in giving medicine to the other person? The next person who is with you, maybe a family member, maybe a friend, because a person is sick. When a person is sick, he should or she should take medication, and the medication which is consumed by that person may not apply for the other person, because the other person is actually not sick. So it is something like this. First, we need to realize what we have been going through in life, and what we have been experiencing in life, what we have been wanting in life, and where it has driven us in life. So when we talk about those topics, it has to be with a person as such, with an individual as such, with one person. It starts with one person. Of course, that person needs to have healing in order to heal somebody else. That's the concept behind meditation.
That's a brilliant answer.
Yeah, and to actually be healed or be tranquil or be calm and have this feeling of nothing could affect you any further, then you will be able to heal another person.
This idea of having a good and a bad, and then having a neutral position, do you think reaching or being identified with a neutral position is a state of being indifferent? For instance, there may be other people suffering around you, and if I've developed a state of where none of these things affect me, but do you think this indifferent to other people's suffering? Can you elaborate on that? Or does meditation enable you to reach out to other people? And how does that happen?
What happens is, first, it's like first healing yourself. When you heal yourself, yes, in a way you can call it you are indifferent, because in a way nothing could affect you any further. But in a different sense, because of the wisdom, because it's not the knowledge, because of the wisdom, you're able to see a wide range after that. You're able to see the entire span of things after that. And then you start healing whatever that can be healed in that sense. Because every person living makes their own decisions whether to suffer or whether not to suffer. So karmically it affects.
So it is through your personal and inner transformation and understanding yourself that you are able to use that as a springboard to help others.
Yes.
And you quite often hear about Buddha being compassionate.
It's called the greatest compassion.
Greatest compassion.
It's not just one spectrum of compassion, not only to your family or your neighbors or to your country, but it's to all living beings after that. Being compassionate to all living beings. So it's a wider spectrum if you take it on that level.
This is obtained through inner reflection, inner understanding.
Inner understanding of healing oneself. And gaining the wisdom, and then transcending that wisdom to the people or subjects or beings that who need it. See, you can't cure a person if that person is telling you, I don't have a sickness. If a person is saying, I have a sickness, I have a problem, please help me in this, then you're able to transcend that wisdom.
It seems to me it's like psychotherapy.
It is. It is, I would say, this is a universal method. It is the science of science. We call science, there are so many talks about science, so many new developments, so many reaching out to new projects, as I said, new innovations and revolutions and everything in science. But have we been able to feed the world? Have we been able to feed a country or a village completely that they don't have hunger anymore? It will never be able to reach up to that. So we need to find another solution out of this. And the science, as we call now, is only one side of it. But the science that we are talking in a universal way is a complete different thing. How to eradicate all of these issues.
it does indeed have universal application born out of inner self-realization and to be able to reach out to the world. From what you're describing, it seems to me that this word meditation is very much like a medication for the mind.
Exactly. It really is. It really is a meditation.
But without the pill.
Without the pill. It's healing. It's to do with calmness and healing, and it is a medication. We treat our body. We treat our body in so many different ways. We think about going to the gym and being fit and taking organic food, and so many elaborated cultures go into elaborated things, but where is the wellness of the mind? Wellness of the mind comes through the awareness of the mind, and the awareness of the mind comes through the actually insight of the mind.
We are getting very close to the finalization of this program, and it's been a very profound conversation. Finally, I would like to ask you about personal questions in terms of how do you spend your spare time? Do you listen to music? Do you watch movies? Do you play sports? Read books? Socialize? Do you do any of these things, or can you explain to us how do you spend your spare time?
Very valuable question. How do I would say the answer to this is yes. I do all of this. Yes, I watch movies, but I watch the movie of the life. Yes, I would say I listen to music, but I listen to the rhythm which is in the mind, which has this attachment and detachment, the rhythm of the sounds of that. Yes, I do play the sports where I could see myself on how I conduct myself in everything. And yes, I do read the book of the universe.
So your preoccupation is mostly focused on achieving liberation and freedom from these passions, and try and guide the world onto a path of wisdom through self-reflection, then spreading that message out. So most of the other activities are focused around that. So in totality, you appear to be more focused on the line of wisdom and teaching and preaching and making other people to come out of this cycle of greed, ill will, and delusion. Do you have a message for the audience, for our viewers, in a nutshell?
Yes, I do. I would actually like to say to anyone who is watching this clip that all the complications that we see through ourselves and throughout the world is only a temporary basis. If you can actually reach out to your mind and the ways of the mind, understand the ways of the thinking pattern, then you are able to free yourself from suffering. And that is the strongest message that I can give you. There is a way out of this problem. It's up to you whether you want to choose it or whether you don't want to choose it. There is a way to eradicate suffering completely. That's if you want to choose it or if you want to leave it. And I urge everyone to find this method, to seek the unseekable, because it could be found, and it has been found, and it will be found. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for that profound message. The whole conversation has been a profound conversation, and we thank you again for taking out time, and we thank our viewers for taking out your time to listen in to this powerful conversation. Until next time, when we will have another distinguished and preeminent personality. And so, thanks again for watching this program.